Hey everyone, if you look at the bottom right hand corner of your screen, you will not see a skip intro button. You know why? Because you can't do that on a podcast, but you can do it on a streaming service, which is what we're going to talk about today. I'm Matt,
I'm Brian.
and we are here to talk about TV. Welcome to TV, guys. How's that for a fast paced intro?
I think it's a good intro, but on that note, there are some shows you should not skip the intro. If you're skipping the intro to like The Office, what are you even a fan?
Simpsons for me is like the biggest do not skip because they have gags in the intro. If you skip the intro, you're going to miss Bart on the chalkboard and the couch gag.
And Futurama as well has some gags in there.
Futurama does too. It has like a line at the beginning, and then its gag is like, "What TV show is it playing at the very end?" Which to me, it's not really a gag; it's just a reference. But the opening line is pretty funny.
Yeah.
What's other ones? Like Stranger Things is really good music, and it's very short, so that's a great one that I don't skip.
I'm trying to think. Yeah, I typically don't skip any of them.
I usually do. I've started also skipping the What If openings because that will also include the credits, and sometimes the credits will have a reveal of who's in the episode. And so like I don't want to be spoiled like, oh, this hero or villain is going to be in this episode because I know that actor. I don't want to be ruined like that.
Yeah, I don't like when shows do that. I know we've talked about this before, but a quick detour for me to okay, season 4 of Lost. A big reveal partway through the season was that Michael came back. Guess what? At the beginning of the episode, they say starring, and they list all the main cast in alphabetical order. Every episode leading up to the reveal of Michael, Harold Perrineau's name was listed in the credits. Like you're giving away that he's coming back.
I can't remember what show it was, and I really want to say Breaking Bad, but there's a show where it's like an actor was surprising you that he was in this episode or something like that. So they didn't feel that actor, like they didn't have the credits until after that actor was revealed in like the soft opening or something like that.
Yeah. I think even Lost did it right later on after season 4, when we were supposed to believe that Jin was dead before they revealed he was. I don't think that Daniel Day Kim was listed until the reveal that he was still on the island.
Yeah, I feel like Harold Perrineau might have been contractually that you had to do that for that series regular, just in terms of, you know, how all the billing works and leads and etc.
Yeah.
I mean, it's still, I you have a point. I won't disagree with that.
We probably won't because we'd listen to it. We do a whole podcast about like crediting issues and crediting facts.
We could. I don't know if I could. I think you could. No problem. I don't know if I could.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, hey, what we're doing for today, since we're talking about streaming shows, we are just going to kind of go down. If you've existed, I guess, in the last couple of years, you have a subscription to something. Even if you use like your siblings or your cousins or like a friend of yours at work or something like that, like their password, you have access to some sort of streaming system. Most people have a couple of them. I have 3 or 4 that I'm subscribed to. Brian, how many do you have?
I have 4. I've got Netflix, Disney Plus, Paramount Plus, and Amazon Prime.
Yeah, I've got Disney Plus, Hulu, HBO Max, and Prime Video. And Brian, have you ever been in that situation where you like sit down and you're like, what do I want to watch? And you've got like all the streaming services, and then after that you have to pick one of the streaming services and then look through all of their stuff, and then you go to like another one. Do you ever have those times?
Yeah, and you almost feel guilty because like, well, sometimes I just want to watch Parks and Rec again, but like I also have so many shows. I mean, when Disney Plus first came out like 2 years ago, I made a watch list because that's one thing that Disney Plus has that Paramount Plus doesn't have. You can make a watch list. I've had stuff sitting on my watch list forever that I should eventually want to get through it.
Paramount Plus doesn't have a watch list. Every other streaming service that I can think of has a watch list.
Yeah.
All of them that. I don't know what Paramount Plus is doing. There's some of these that are like, what are you even doing? Like HBO Max has a great user interface, but the like the IT for it isn't super great. I've had a lot of IT issues that have popped up. Meanwhile, Amazon Prime has a great selection, but the user interface like is the worst user interface I've ever seen in my life. I don't understand how it can be so counterintuitive when you've had all these other streaming services come before you and do it right, and you can't figure out a way to do yours better.
Yeah.
Bezos, stop going to space. Fix this first.
I think it's Bezos.
I don't care. He gets Bezos right now. 0 stars for Bezos.
You know what's interesting is if you go back like 5 years, the only one we would need to talk about is Netflix. Because before Disney Plus and Paramount Plus and like all these things, Netflix had like the big selection. They had like every show you could think of, not every show, but a lot of shows. And then you start to see it happening. Like Disney Plus is one of the big ones where all of a sudden they started to split. And you're like, well, what? I mean, Netflix still has a bunch of good content on it, but it's not as universal. Like now, you know, in order to get the Disney stuff or the Marvel stuff, you have to get Disney Plus. Whereas you used to have some of that stuff on Netflix, and Netflix was like the main big hub because it was the first big streaming service.
Yeah, and Netflix strong Blockbuster and kicked it into the stomach and said, "No, you don't exist anymore. We exist." And then, you know, Hulu was another one that was around the same time, but it was a lot different than what it is now. Hulu wasn't even, I mean, neither of these companies did their own content to begin with, but Hulu was like, hey, did you miss your show last night? Well, wait 12 hours and then you can watch whatever show that it was on basic cable that you missed, and you can watch this new episode. And sometimes they'd have to limit it to like only like the last 5 episodes or something like that.
Yep.
But for a college student who didn't have any cable, I was like, this is great. I love being able to watch these shows if I can't catch them that night. I don't have a way to record them, so let me watch Lost on a Thursday instead.
That's how I watched the final season of The Office, was on Hulu.
Yeah, a lot of House, I think, was a big one for me. That House was a pain in the butt because Fox had weird rules about it too. But
yeah, and it's funny you talking about how they're not what they used to be with Netflix. You know, sometimes you have things in your life that you know that eventually you'll be like the weird grandpa telling your kids like, well, back in my day this happened, and they'd be like, oh yeah, sure. And one of those big things is like, back in my day I got Netflix mailed me DVDs. I actually had that service. And it was just, even like 10 years later, it sounds insane to think that was how they started.
Well, yeah, it's fun to say things like, I'm older than the internet, or I'm older than Google, or something like that. It's like, what? You're older than that?
I told my niece that YouTube was invented when I was in high school, and she thought that was crazy.
Yeah. It's like, what did you guys do before that? Well, sit down. We had a show called America's Funniest Home Videos.
Yeah,
this is the third week in a row. Bob Saget was referenced 3 weeks in a row. 3 weeks.
Is this going to be a running gag every week? We have to mention Bob Saget.
I guess so. I don't know what we've done, what perpetual hell we've entered into that we now have to bring up Bob Saget in every single episode. So today's episode, what we're talking about, we're gonna give you some shows that are on these streaming services. I think, what did we decide on? Because I think we had 5: HBO Max, Netflix, Disney Plus, Prime Video, and Hulu. Did we?
I didn't have Prime Video. I had Netflix, Disney Plus, Paramount Plus, Hulu, and HBO Max. We can talk about it Prime Video too.
So you talk about Paramount Plus, I'll talk about Prime Video, and that'll be just fine.
Sounds good.
So if you have any of those services, we might bring up a show that you haven't watched. I actually have a couple for each, but I'm only going to go into detail on like one of them for each service. So let's start at the behemoth. Let's start at Netflix because they started everything off. So, Brian, what's a show on Netflix that you've got that you would say, go watch this?
I've got a whole ton of things. Let's see. I think we talked about the show. Actually, there's 2 of them. One we've talked about. One we probably will do an episode about it at some point. Cobra Kai and The Good Place, I think, are 2 of my biggest recommendations. Cobra Kai, well, it's not a Netflix original. It was passed around on YouTube and then went to Netflix. And Good Place was an NBC original. Both fantastic shows, and they're both in that realm where people have heard of them, but a lot of people haven't seen them yet. And with both of them, like, I couldn't put them down. My son recently watched through all of both of these series.
Yeah, really good. We had a whole Cobra Kai episode, so if you haven't listened to that, go listen to that.
Well, they might not be able to, because I'm not sure if that one's available anymore.
I'm not sure either. That's why I paused. I'm like, is it still there? I don't know. Good Place is another one, because Good Place does a really good job of progressing a story and taking in places that like it's a show that would get stale if they stayed the same, but they don't stay the same, and so it brings you on this journey through all the 4 seasons that they have, and it's one of those shows they knew how to go out on top. I think maybe 2 more seasons they would have started getting stale. So I think that they could have gotten one more really good season out of it, but you don't want to force something on the writers when they don't have the ideas for it.
And if you like Parks and Rec and Brooklyn Nine-Nine, it's the same creators. I mean, there's always some actor overlap, and that's Michael Schur has a stamp of approval on that show because he created it.
Yep. And just a brief synopsis is Kristen Bell. She wakes up. She's dead at the very beginning of the first episode. Come to find out she's in the good place, quote unquote. And so Michael, the angel, Ted Danson, is talking to her and kind of walking her through what heaven looks like. I mean, they never call it heaven. They just always call it the good place. And so, this is what happens when you make it to the good place. So it's a comedy about that and kind of exploring the afterlife. Now, it's definitely not theologically accurate in any sense of the but it is funny and it is unique, and sometimes it gives some good ideas about life itself and kind of gets a little deeper than you'd expect.
Well, one thing I'll say, and this is only a spoiler for the pilot episode, but it's a hook that I think will get people to watch it, is that she discovers that they made a mistake and she's not supposed to be there. That they're talking about all these great things she did in her life, and she's like, "Oh crap, that's not me." And so, I mean, there are other twists. I'm not going to give away everything, but that is an interesting dynamic. How would you feel if you woke up and you accidentally made it to heaven?
Yeah, and it's really funny too because she has to keep, she doesn't want to get found out and get kicked to hell or whatever, and so she's surrounded by all these like good people, and she's like this terrible, awful human being surrounded by fantastic people. I'm like, I don't deserve this. Also, these people suck. They are not my sort of people. Yeah. So you're right. That's a good hook. A show that I would talk about. I'll bring up. Actually, I'll bring up 2 that Netflix took and dragged through the mud. House of Cards was really interesting early on. It probably, I haven't watched it since everything came out with Kevin Spacey, because apparently he played the same character in real life. And so it would be, I don't know how it would age today, but like it really went down the rails in the final seasons. And I didn't even watch the final season when they wrote Kevin Spacey out of it. But it definitely was really intriguing. It was a great opening premise. The first couple seasons were really interesting. And then Arrested Development was another one that was originally on Fox. It was a great show, but that did go downhill once Netflix got it as well. The first season that Netflix did was fine. Some people really hated it. The season after that, I felt like they really didn't even try. It was bad writing. They didn't get the characters at that point, and it just got too absurd. I thought that the culmination, like the best of it, was in season 3, with season 4 being not too bad. But a show that has been really good and has not gone downhill, that's another one that I think we're going to talk about, is Stranger Things. Now, the reason why you guys have heard of Stranger Things, whether you've watched it or not, you've at least heard of it. Yeah. And you probably know the hook that it's this paranormal stuff happening in a small town. And like the movie does so well of paying homage to all these 80s classics. And so you get heavy feel of like even things that aren't specifically horror movies. I guess Jaws is horror, but like that you wouldn't expect from this. Like it draws inspiration off of Jaws. It draws inspiration off of E.T. It draws inspiration off of Poltergeist. It draws inspiration off of what else? Like second season Ghostbusters. It really is just like anything in the 80s is fair game for them to draw inspiration from. So it's really a lot of fun to like see these references, especially if you love the 80s. But even so than that, it really has a great character base. It has wonderful stories, good character arcs, some of them better than others in certain seasons, but I really love the actors. David Harbour is just absolutely fantastic in that, and also all the kid actors too. They've all like really blown up, especially what is her name now? Millie Bobby Brown.
Millie Bobby Brown, yeah. It's been on my list to watch, and I think I'm going to actually have to watch this pretty soon, but mainly because I'm thinking this is like a good quality show that I feel like deserves an episode of our podcast, and I feel like it would be more interesting if I had things to say about it. So coming soon, eventually, I will watch Stranger Things, and then once we're done with it, we'll do some kind of Stranger Things episode. You heard it here. Now I have to do it.
Also, we always love having guests on, and Stranger Things is a great show that I'm sure has a lot of fans out there. So if you're like, I've been dying to talk to someone about Stranger Things, we're more than happy to hear from you. So go ahead and reach out to us. We might have you on the episode. If we don't have you on the episode, we'll at least be like, hey, so and so said he liked this about it. We'll
Yep.
give you a shout out at least.
Mhm. Another show I mentioned on Netflix. I started on Netflix. Then Netflix canceled it, and then it went to Pop TV for a season, and then that got canceled. Which is One Day at a Time. I think I've mentioned this before. I think Matt, you said you hadn't seen it.
I'm not familiar with it. No.
It's a really interesting show. It's about a Cuban they're Cuban, a Cuban family that lives in live in LA, I think, and it's just like a single mom and her teenage kids, and her mom, played by Rita Moreno. It's just a really interesting look. It's kind of got a little bit of like the struggling family and their dynamics and how they like their beliefs kind of clash and just how they go through life together. Like it's a family where they will get super mad at each other, but at the end of the day, they always have each other's backs.
And the show has Ned Ryerson. Bing. Actually, it's Stephen Tobolowsky, but
Yeah.
the guy from Groundhog Day.
He plays such a funny character. He plays one of those like lovable, sad sack characters. Was like every time he talks about his life, like, dang, your life is depressing, but in a funny way.
Those can really be good, or they can be really bad.
Yeah, and they also have like they're good friends with the landlord, who's like this spoiled rich guy who like never had to work a day in his life, but he's so like relatable and down to earth and just wants to be included in the family because he always had all the material things. Like his family was rich, gave him all the money and things he wanted, but he never had that family connection. So he like inserts himself into like part of the family while forgetting that, oh yeah, I'm a rich white dude.
Nice. And it looks like it was based off like an old 70s show too.
Yeah, I've never
Not
seen that
that
show.
70s show, but a different one.
Yeah.
All right. So check that out. That's interesting. So Netflix, there you go. Let's move on to HBO Max. So HBO Max for me, I love Impractical Jokers, and HBO Max has all the Impractical Jokers content. It even has like the extra stuff, like inside the jokes and Joey Fatone's after specials that he does. It has the Impractical Jokers movie. So Impractical Jokers, and I think we've talked about this, four best friends in real life in the like kind of a reality TV show, game show type setting, where essentially they're like daring each other. It's like Jack a word. I don't like to swear. It's like that, but like toned down, where it's just like, they do things to try and make each other like uncomfortable, or like they'll have to say exactly what the other person tells them to say, or do what the other person tells them to do, because if they lose the challenge, and whoever loses the most challenges in an episode gets a big punishment, and those punishments can be like really terrible. Like a guy was afraid of spiders, and so one thing they did was they chained him down, and then they like poured spiders on him and had like these spiders walk over. Like that would be terrible. I would hate that. And he was so uncomfortable and so afraid, and like you felt bad laughing at it. Like the one I felt really bad at laughing was when Murray did skydiving, because he's deathly afraid of heights.
Yeah.
And he's like crying as he does it. And I'm like, oh, the poor guy. But at the same time, it's really funny. But the show that other one I want to talk about that I just started, because I've heard really good things about it, and I haven't gotten through the first season even, but I'm just going to bring it up because we haven't really talked about it, and it's going to be a precursor because I'm sure I'm going to talk about it in the future. It's really good. It's called The Wire. It's an old FX show that it's got a lot of actors that you would recognize, like Idris Elba before he got big. It even has like a young teenage Michael B. Jordan in it. And so it's got a lot of great actors, and it's about this group of cops in Baltimore trying to bring down this drug ring. And so you follow like the people in that drug ring in these Baltimore projects, and you also follow the police that are tracking them down and trying to that's the hook. That's where it begins. And so it's a great show so far. I don't know how it ends. I don't know what other seasons hold for it, but I just wanted to bring it up because so far it's great.
I'm looking at it's got Idris Elba in it.
Yeah. Yep. I think this is really one of his first big roles.
Okay. One thing I don't have HBO Max, but one thing I do know it has is that Sesame Street has gone to HBO, and they have put up a bunch of classic episodes. So you can go all the way back to like the 60s and 70s and watch like old school Sesame Street, which is kind of cool.
I love that that's what you chose to bring up. It's just so fitting of who you are, Brian. It's so great. It's like, oh, The Wire, this like R-rated show about drugs and people getting shot and gang life, and you're like, and then there's Sesame Street. This is the ghetto, but like a nice happy ghetto.
I mean, they do have they've had a homeless character for like 50 years. If you count
Yeah.
Oscar the Grouch.
I mean, it is supposed to be like a low income barrio area.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like high class, but still, like everything's great there. It's very communal, friendly. No one gets shot anymore.
The other show I was going to mention that HBO Max has, and it's one of those shows where, like, I know my parents never wanted me to watch it, but I still ended up watching it, which is South Park. And there are some episodes of South Park that are just hilarious. Like,
You pulled a 180 there.
I know, but South Park is just so funny.
I think I've maybe seen like one episode or like half of an episode. I've never gotten into South Park.
I mean, it's definitely its own thing, and you kind of have to be okay with inappropriateness. But
Yeah.
like one episode I think is hilarious is they go to one of these old timey places, like where our friend Mike works, where everyone is in character, being like it's like 1800s, whatever. A guy breaks in and he's like holding everyone at gunpoint, asking for the combination to the safe. But everyone is so committed to being in character, like, well, we don't know what's a safe, and like people are dying, they're killing people, and they're still keeping up this ruse. They had to be like, imagine a future device where you could put in a code to keep things. What might you put as, like, they had to frame it as if they were imagining it so they could give them the code while still staying in character, and it's just ridiculous. That's the humor of South Park.
That is, and if you like South Park, you're happy because you're going to get more content. That HBO Max signed an exclusive deal for creating a lot more South Park content going forward. But yeah, that's not a show. I did see Team America: World Police done by the same guys. So I mean, and I've heard that the World of Warcraft episode is like is peak South Park, like one of the funniest episodes.
That is one of the best ones. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, what should we move on to? I picked last time where we're moving. Where do you think we should move on to?
All right, let's go with I think is going to be the newer big behemoth besides Netflix, which is Disney Plus, because Disney has just over the years bought so many franchises. It's like if there's a great franchise, there's a 50-50 chance, maybe even 70-30 that Disney owns it. Because I mean, you got all Marvel, all Star Wars, all the classic Disney. You got Pixar, you got Muppets. There's so much that Disney has.
Yeah, and you actually even really see that in. So in the movie Free Guy, there's a lot of references actually that they make. And as I'm watching, I'm like, I wonder if they did reshoots to this to be able to use Disney properties that they're like referencing and that they're drawing attention to. And it was like really good stuff. It's the same as like there was a Simpsons episode, not an episode, but like a Simpsons short they released about a month ago or maybe 2 months ago. And they had like all the residents of Springfield looking like Avenger heroes. And at one point it shows a shot of someone just holding a sign saying this is what happens when Disney buys Fox. Like that's exactly it. The sky's the limit for what Disney can do. And so it is great to see some of these shows on there like The Simpsons. That's the one that I'm also rewatching right now.
I didn't know when I saw Free Guy, which is a great movie, by the way. Go see Free Guy. I didn't know that was a Disney movie until that moment with
Don't you got to beep yourself out because that's a huge spoiler.
Well, I didn't say. Okay, what should I say? At the moment, okay, I didn't know it was a Disney movie until I saw the moment with that actor from the franchise who Matt knows because I just said it, and I'm just gonna shout out what I said earlier.
Perfect. That is completely inconspicuous.
Well, I didn't say what happened on screen.
No, you're right. It's like, yeah. Never mind. I won't touch it anymore. You didn't spoil anything. The way you said it was fine and also terrible at the same time. This is all in one. Other shows, like we've talked about the MCU shows, but I would definitely recommend those. I really love they're all really good. What If has got my attention. Angie doesn't like What If as much, but I like What If. Mm-hmm. And then there's another show. Oh, I love the Disney parks. I love Walt Disney World. I love like, hearing all the information about it. They've got some really good documentary stuff on them. There are two things that are pretty big. One of them is called The Imagineering Story, and that is a 6-episode miniseries that pretty much goes from Walt deciding building Disneyland and kind of his journey in doing that, all the way up to launching Shanghai Disney and the one in China, that park that just opened within 2 years ago, 3 years ago. So it's like everything in between. And it really goes into depth on a lot of like popular rides. It goes into depth on a lot of things that were going on in Disney business at the time. It's so interesting. And then in a lesser degree, that's more focused on specific things. There's one that just released. Last month, they had like 5 episodes, and then they just released the other 5 episodes this week called Behind the Attraction.
Okay. I haven't been to Disney World or any of the Disney parks in years. That'd be interesting to watch and eventually go to the parks.
I mean, it also kind of serves as a commercial because they of course they're glorifying themselves because it's Disney. That's what they're going to do. But it is rightfully deserved as well to be like, look at the attention that we put into these things. And like, you really did. You did some awesome stuff. And I can't help but now want to go there and ride these rides that you're talking about. So it's a very effective commercial.
You know what I might send you, Matt, and some of our listeners might like this too. There's a video series a while back where a guy did reviews of like all the different ABC Family type, TGIF type of shows who did a Disney World episode. So Full House, Family Matters, Boy Meets World, Roseanne, and Sabrina the Teenage Witch. All 5 of those shows did an episode where they went to Disney World because Disney's like, well, we own this show and we own this park, so why don't we use the show to promote our park? And it's so blatant. I mean, they're interesting stories, some better than others. It's so blatant, the advertisements, because like, yeah, this family from San Francisco, they're going to book a suite at the Grand Floridian Hotel. Like,
the Grand Floridian is a pretty awesome hotel.
Those are interesting videos to watch because the guy just kind of talks about it, because the guy is also like a Disney expert. And at one point they say like, oh, we're going to go to this ride over this way. And he's like, well, you just pointed in the wrong direction. That park is the complete opposite direction, which people like me wouldn't know that. But if you're like, I don't know how familiar you are, but you might catch that and be like, well, nope.
I might have been able to. It's like on the Boy Meets World episode where they had a lot more filming that they could dedicate to Epcot. And so there's 2 shots that happen at Magic Kingdom, one from Splash Mountain and then one on the Dumbo ride. But it's like everything else happens at Epcot. And so it's so funny for them to be like, Walt Disney World, Walt Disney World, Walt Disney World. And then they go to Epcot, which I love Epcot. But I mean, like The Simpsons also did a Disney World episode. And they're like, we're going to Disney World. And then they land at Epcot and they're all so disappointed. And the whole episode mocks Epcot the entire time. And so at the end of the episode, Homer sneaks into Magic Kingdom over the barbed wire fence or something like that.
One thing I was going to say also with the Disney Plus is, for me, it's fun to go back and pick up all these old school Disney Channel shows, which I don't know if it's just me, I'm an adult now, or if the shows have gotten worse, but Disney Channel shows now, they don't seem like they're as good or as interesting as the Golden Age, which for me is like Even Stevens and Lizzie McGuire.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen like one episode here and there when it's like on TV at a waiting room or something like that of these Disney shows. I'm like, what is this garbage I'm watching? Like, I call it garbage. It feels so forced. I don't find a lot of it funny. And so I wonder if there's like this nostalgia factor of looking back at the old TV shows that we used to watch, and like they're probably just as cheesy, but we grew up on them when we weren't as literate in terms of good entertainment. So,
but I will say, I got my niece Kayla, I recommended both Lizzie McGuire and Even Stevens to her, and she watched through both of those shows. So it is approved by a current day 11-year-old.
I like Even Stevens. Liz McGuire was okay to me. It wasn't for me like must see. It was just okay.
It was must see for me because of the character of Gordo. I thought he was just a really interesting character.
Yeah. I like, of all the characters, of course, like Gordo the best. Her brother was really annoying.
Yeah.
And that, I mean, I know that's the point, but I've always said, like, with annoying characters, whenever you're writing an annoying character, you have to make them not actually be annoying, but to have annoying tendencies that if you were around them all the time, they would be annoying. So like that you can understand. I feel like video game Borderlands, Claptrap is well done in that regard. Even some people think he goes that far or too far, but
Last year, Lizzie McGuire was one of those shows. They did a bunch of them. They did a Zoom reunion with the whole cast, and they reread an episode. And it's amazing how Jake Thomas, who played the little brother Matt on that show, he just turns into like an annoying 12-year-old, even though he's like 30.
Well, so do I, and you still put up with me. But
True.
all right, moving on to Hulu.
Sure. I have a few things that I don't have Hulu, but same with HBO Max. I kind of looked up what's on there so I could recommend things.
On there is another FX show that I think has just tremendous banter, and that's Archer. If you like Bob's Burgers, it's the same type of
Okay.
comedy,
I love
but
Bob's
done
Burgers.
like, yeah, it's a little bit more R-rated. I mean,
Mhm.
it's still a TV show, so it doesn't go too far, but
Yeah.
and it's also the same guy. H. John Benjamin is the same main actor voice.
Oh, cool. Like him.
Another one, Arrested Development. If you like Arrested Development, they use a lot of similar actors from Arrested Development that they brought over into this show. It's a spy comedy that it's just absurd and ridiculous, of like taking the James Bond idea and
Mhm.
bringing it to like, well, what if he really was alive? He would be super selfish. James Bond is a pretty selfish character if you think about it. So if this was a real life person, people all at this agency would think he's a jerk, and that he's so spoiled and like all this sort of stuff. So it's a really funny show that just has a great back and forth
Okay.
with so many funny characters.
That's another one that I've heard has been really good. I know, like, I don't know who specific. There's a lot of people who are on that show.
Yeah, lots of Aisha Taylor, Chris Parnell. I can't remember her name. Kitty from Arrested Development.
You
I wanna
mean
say it's like
the
Allison.
mom? Isn't her name?
No,
Oh,
mom's.
you're talking about Kitty. Oh, I remember. I thought you meant Kitty Foreman. No,
Yeah,
what's her name? Judy Greer.
there you go. Thank you. And then Jessica Walters is in it too. Rest in peace.
Mm-hmm. Other show that I've looked up is on Hulu. It's a great show. Mentioned in passing is Superstore, and
Oh, yeah,
Superstore is, I say, it's like The Office meets The Simpsons. It's got
yeah,
that absurdist humor. You got the bumbling boss in charge. You got someone who's kind of like a Dwight figure. You got a lot of the Office DNA in there. But then it's just the absurdity of Cloud9 being like a Walmart ripoff, and all the different antics and characters. It's got that Simpsons thing where you have your core cast, but then you have like a wide like depth of supporting goofy characters that you can bring in for jokes and stuff, like Simpsons has.
nice. Yeah, that's a show that I think I would like if I ended up watching it. So I'll have to check it out sometime.
Mm.
Um, oh, there was one more show too. Angie and I just watched it not too long ago, and it's 8 episodes, maybe it's 10 episodes.
What was it?
I
You
can't
glitched right when
remember.
you said the title of it.
I didn't say the title. It's a
Oh,
it's a
close.
one season show. It's just a mini series right now, but that's 11/22/63, and that stars James Franco. He finds that he's able to go back in time, and every single time he goes back in time, it's always to the same exact point in time. So, and that's in like 1960, which is 3 years before Kennedy is assassinated. So the whole focus on 11/22/63. So the whole focus of the show is, if he can go back and live there for 3 years and prepare for the Kennedy assassination, can he prevent it?
Hmm.
And it's a really interesting idea, and it's not a comedy, but it has some fun. It has some humor to it,
Yeah.
and the characters are really endearing too. I really like James Franco and some of the co-stars that he has too. It's just such an interesting concept. I love that alternate history type idea, and I mean, it ended just fine. There's some, if I was writing it, I would have done it a little differently, but I can't specifically say it was a bad ending. But I was like, no, I want it to be like this. But still, it's a really good show, and if you're binging it, you can watch this in a week or so. So
Yeah. And I think I have to mention this just because our most recent episode you listened to was about How I Met Your Mother, which is also on Hulu. So if you're listening to last week's episode, you're thinking, I think that sounds like a good show. I want to watch it. Go to Hulu.
there you go. Do it. Do it now. Go to Hulu.
Well, finish this episode first and then go to Hulu.
Nope. You have to turn it off right this second. All right. Let's move to Paramount Plus.
Okay. So Paramount Plus is interesting because it's such a mixed bag. So it merged with CBS All Access. So you have CBS stuff, and then you have all the old school Nickelodeon. Well, and they have new Nickelodeon too, I suppose, but forget that. But which was the draw for me to get it. And then you also have BET and Comedy Central. So you get
That is a unique.
yeah,
Well, okay.
you have a lot of really good stand-up shows on there. And then you also have, like I said, the old school Nickelodeon shows. Like I've been rewatching Keenan and Kel. That's not great comedy, and
Nice.
I'm sure I have nostalgia factor blinders on there, but it's a fun show. And that was, people recognized that Keenan Thompson was funny, and he's still on SNL today. So
That's true. Keenan is really funny. I
mhm.
mean, Keenan kind of played a straight man to Kel a lot of the time
Yeah.
in that show. That Kel got to be the more exuberant, dramatic one, but
Mhm.
Keenan does a good straight man in turn because like he's got the I'm done with this face
Yeah.
that is just hilarious. He does that I feel like every single thing I see him and he brings out that face.
They had it kind of in different ways because Keenan was the smart one. He was also the not the inappropriate, like the irresponsible one who loved to come up with these schemes, whereas Kel was dumb, but Kel like had more hesitation to like getting in trouble and stuff. Like Kel was terrified of Keenan's dad, so you had it kind of bouncing back and forth because like Kel's dumb, Keenan's smart, but at the same time Kel sometimes knew this is a dangerous thing, but he went along with it because Keenan, it was like a get rich quick scheme or whatever. So they kind of bounced that straight man back and forth.
Paramount Plus also they absorbed a huge franchise, Star Trek.
Mm-hmm.
Star Trek is a great show. If I'm even looking at like the Star Trek shows they've got, and I haven't seen like half of these too. Like I've seen the originals, like I've seen Next Generation, I watched Voyager, I watched Enterprise. Those were all great series. There's a show that I've heard really good things about. If you're a Star Trek fan, it's called Star Trek Lower Decks, and what it is, it's kind of like Spaceballs, the TV show, where it's mocking the Star Trek paradigm, but also at the same time, it's paying homage to it. And so it's like it does a lot of referential humor to Star Trek, and then also picks fun at and pokes holes in a lot
Mm-hmm.
of the Star Trek ideas. And so it does it, from what I've heard, it does it in a really clever way that if you're a fan, you're in on the joke instead of it like mocking you, sort of
Okay,
thing.
that's cool. On the subject of Nickelodeon shows, people always mention the Nickelodeon cartoons. They always mention like Rugrats and SpongeBob and Hey Arnold, but a couple of ones that are not talked about as much, but are still great in my opinion. Rocket Power and what is it? Rocket Power and As Told by Ginger, both really good '90s Nickelodeon shows.
I know Rocket Power. I've never heard of it as told by Ginger.
It's centers around teenage girls, obviously, but it's good.
You just got put on a watch list for saying that. Oh, I watch a show centering around teenage girls. Like,
I
all
was
right,
I was
typing it
also a
in.
teenager at the time. Is that if that helps?
um, I I don't know if I like this show just because I I was told not to watch it, and I still would sneak it and get to watch it. But Are You Afraid of the Dark?
Okay.
That was really like smart stuff for a kid. It was like good horror for a kid. It was I don't know what it was about that era of like all these kids horror shows. Like Goosebumps was like a big popular
Yeah.
thing, and I read the books. I love the Choose Your Own Adventure Goosebumps.
Hmm.
But yeah, R.L. Stein just cranked those things out,
He
and they
did.
kind of took these ideas and they created Are You Afraid of the Dark? Even though they also had a Goosebumps TV show at another point. But I think Are You Afraid of the Dark was that counter, like the competition
Hmm.
to getting in on that market, and they did really good. There's some episodes that still like stick with you in the back of your mind.
Hmm. Yeah, they're good. A lot of them are good because they resolve the main issue, and just right at the very end of the tag, they'll like hint at a new issue, and they never resolve it. It's like it
Yeah,
doesn't always have to be all's well in Whoville.
it's like listening to a CD and every song ends on like dissonance. You're like, no, resolve the chord. That's a music, I guess. I don't know how well that translated for you, but I
No,
think you can at least understand.
I understood it. Yeah,
Yeah,
but as soon as with the Comedy Central side of it, there's so much stand-up comedy out there, and I love stand-up comedy, but some of it is just not good. So like, it's hard to recommend this comedian or that comedian because sometimes you just have to. It's just trial and error. But like I said, I love good stand-up comedy. One thing I'm realizing, I went back because they have a bunch of these old Comedy Central roasts. I don't know if they still do them. But remember, like every couple of years, there'd be like a super random roast. So
yeah.
I
And
watched.
you're like, why are you roasting Flavor Flav? Who cares?
exactly. Well, maybe it's a weird place to start, but I watched the roast of Donald Trump, and
That
then
would be interesting to watch, knowing what we know now.
yeah, and I think it was. I think he was gearing up to eventually run for office. He it was before his it was in office, and they were all joking like it would be super crazy and weird if this guy ran for president, as if that would never happen. And here we are. But
And
then
this is the world we're living in.
I didn't make it all the way through, but I watched part of the roast of Bob Saget. It's not good. Don't
You
watch
you
it.
you should have saved that reference for next week so that we could continue the Bob Saget train.
Yeah. So I mean, those are two that I don't really recommend. But I mean, I don't know. Maybe if the Jeff, I remember liking the Jeff Foxworthy one. So maybe I don't know if that one's on there or not. Maybe I could watch that one.
Final thing, I think I've brought this up before. There's a show called Nickelodeon Arcade back from like the old early 90s.
Yeah.
And like the contestants would play like arcade games for challenges, they'd answer trivia, and then the final thing was they'd go into like this green screen room and it wouldn't show you the screen, it would show you like they're in this video game. And so then they are trying to maneuver in this video game to collect these pieces or whatever before the time runs out or before their lives run out or something like that. And I remember just it was the coolest thing as a kid. I loved this show. I don't know how it would hold up for my nostalgia viewing, but I loved it as a kid. It was so cool to watch.
Nice.
Yeah.
Did we hit all of our main ones? Oh, we didn't talk about it, Peacock, but okay, Peacock's got The Office and Parks and Rec, which is really the only reason I would ever get that, except I have the DVDs. So there's Peacock.
And I'll bring up Prime Video. I said that we were going to talk
Oh, that's
about
right. I
it
forgot.
a little bit, but I mean, when I prepared it, I kind of focused on. There's a lot of shows on there that I haven't watched but are on my list, like The Incredible Miss Maisel and The Man in High Castle. I've watched like half the season of the Jack Ryan, Tom Clancy's Jack Ryan, and for me, like the ones that still stand out are just those typical like Community, Brooklyn Nine-Nine, Scrubs. Those are all in there. Once Upon a Time, I've brought it up before. That's a really good show that I liked. It didn't know when to end, but it had a really good premise for several seasons that kept you intrigued. It's one of those shows like Smallville. Is like for the beginning that it had, those first like 5 seasons, you loved it, and then you're like, well, I guess I got to finish out with like the last two that aren't that great, whatever it was.
You mentioned The Amazing Miss Maisel, which I haven't seen either, but if you like that show, that's also created by Amy Sherman Palladino, who created Gilmore Girls, which is on Netflix, which you should all watch.
I have been watching part of Gilmore Girls because Angela will just have it on, and so I'll see bits and pieces. So I'm getting to learn things, and she just like is like the dumbest thing we ever did was to have Luke's daughter just pop out from nowhere, and she like was just going off about Luke suddenly having a daughter, and I'm like, okay.
April is not the problem. April is a good character. The problem is how Luke reacted to April being there and called off the wedding. That was what people had a problem with it because they were leading up to the Lorelai Luke wedding, and then that got derailed because of April. April herself is a fine character and a good actor and brought refreshment to the show, I thought. Angie.
Well, and she was like, it's so dumb that that would be the case. Is like the writers just were so lazy to be like, we need a reason to break up Luke and Lorelai, but we can't have the audience hate Luke. What are we going to do? And apparently the solution was April.
Yeah. He found out that an old girlfriend had gotten pregnant 13 years ago and never told him. And all of a sudden, like, boom, you got a daughter you never knew about.
Yep. So there you go. Spoiled it.
Show's been off the air long enough.
I know. There's a chance I'll end up watching it because she just watches all the time, and I might just be like, fine, whatever. You can have it on.
I have one specific episode I was saving for if we did another one of those, we give each other episodes kind of thing. One episode of Gilmore Girls specifically that I think is a fun episode, and it focuses on a lot of the quirky townies. And that's the one that I was going to give you, called Bracebridge Dinner in season 2. Ask Angie about that one. That's a good episode.
All right, I'll ask her about it, see what she says.
All right, sounds good.
Well, that's it. Those are streaming services. I know we didn't cover all of them, but at the same time, there's like 90, so we're not going to have that long of an episode to cover every single one.
Here's Netflix's entire catalog, starting with A.
Yeah, and then even that too. Like You can be like, hey, I like this is a good show, and be like, well, yeah, it is. We just didn't have time to bring it up. I just wanted to point out some shows that for me, I didn't think we would talk about too much on here. So that I think this was a good episode to be able to do that. We had fun. Let's move into trivia.
All right, last week we talked about How I Met Your Mother, and Marshall's dad, who was a recurring character, was played by actor Bill Fagerbakke, who you might recognize the voice of because he is the voice of Patrick Star on SpongeBob.
Patrick Star. Yeah.
It's one of those things where when you're watching through it, a few different times mentioning to people like, did you know that's the voice of Patrick? And every time it's like, oh my gosh, I can't unhear that now.
And Mr. Krabs is voiced by Clancy Brown, who is just a tremendous voice actor. He's great. He's a tremendous actor, period. But I love Clancy Brown's one of those guys that like, there's some actors when you see that they're going to be in it, it's like it raises the whole production completely.
Yep.
And Clancy Brown's one of those that I'm like, this guy's great. What was it? Cowboys and Aliens. He was in that. And as soon as I see him pop up on the screen, I'm like, I like this movie more. It ended up being a forgettable movie, but Clancy Brown was great.
Clancy Brown was also in Lost and had a pretty important but brief part.
Yeah. He was mainly interacting with Desmond, but he pops up in a Sayid episode. I don't know if a Sayid episode came first or after. I can't remember. I think it came first.
I think it came first because then, if you remember, it's like, what? This guy was in the military. All of a sudden, now he's on the island.
Yeah. Did he show up any time after Desmond's episode?
No, for a second there I thought he was in a Kate episode, but no, because it was like Kate's dad was also in a Sayid episode. It's like weird crossovers.
Yeah, that's right, because her dad's in the military. Yeah, it was the same episode that had Clancy Brown as Kate's dad popped up. All right, so my trivia for this, we talked about Stranger Things. Why not have a Stranger Things trivia? And Winona Ryder is a character in Stranger Things. I guess it's not Stranger Things trivia. It's a Winona Ryder question instead of Stranger Things. But when Winona Ryder was younger, there was a young girl from her hometown that went missing while she was filming a movie. And it was a big deal in that hometown, and it ended up being more national news. And to the point that Winona Ryder, she actually dedicated a movie that she was in and filming at the time to this young lady who disappeared. And she also put up a like $200,000. What do you call those? Where it's like if reward? Reward. There you go. Reward for any information of finding this young girl. So my question is, what was the movie that was dedicated to, what was her name? Penny, I think. I'll have to look it up. I can't remember what the young girl's name was.
Don't know.
Not Winona Ryder. She seems down to earth for being a celebrity. And I live 20 minutes away from the hometown that she was named after, Winona, Minnesota.
Oh, there you go. Wait, You said you grew up there or you live there?
No, I live 20 minutes away from it.
Okay, sounds good. I was like, I thought you grew up in Nebraska.
I did grow up in Nebraska. I'm just changing my story. There's holes in my story. You don't really know me. I'm like the Joker. My past is multiple choice.
Are all the choices Nebraska?
Yes. Did I grow up in A, Nebraska, B, NE, C, the state to the west of Iowa, or D, Nebraska?
It makes me think of in Avengers Infinity War, it was like, I'm not from Earth, I'm from Missouri. And Tony Stark, like, that's on Earth.
Oh, do you one better? Why is Gamora?
That whole interaction with those group of Avengers meeting that group of Guardians was just hilarious.
Yeah. What was the one that like Tony, like when they're discussing a plan, I think Mantis said something, like Tony just like stares at her like, what? I loved it. He went from having like just Spider-Man's ridiculousness to deal with, having all of these like kids. It's like he was like the dad of the group, him and Doctor Strange.
Well, he was saying about Drax and Mantis, what do they do exactly? And Mantis just looks, kick names, take ass.
That's right. See, Brian will swear on our podcast. I don't. I censor myself. But then Brian brings up Sesame Street, and I talk about The Wire. So, I mean, it balances out.
True. All right. You want to talk about what we're doing next week?
Oh, yeah. Well, I don't think this will be next week, but coming up, we're going to be doing an episode about What If. But instead, we're going to create our own What If universes. So the show What If is pretty much like, it poses these questions. What would happen if instead of Peter Quills, T'Challa was kidnapped as Star-Lord and he became Star-Lord? What would happen if instead of Captain America, it was Peggy Carter that got the super soldier serum? So we want to ask you guys questions. What are some TV shows that you're like, I've always wanted them to go this route? Matt, Brian, what if this happened? Because then we'll look at some of these answers and we'll kind of come up with our ideas and we'll give you an idea. And also feel free if you want to be like, I've always thought that this would happen from Matt, but we would definitely love to give feedback as well. So submit to us either through Facebook or email or Twitter or texting, because a lot of you have our numbers, your what if questions for some of these TV shows. So that's it. That's what's coming up down the pipeline, and we look forward to hearing from you. But until next time, I'm Matt.
I'm Brian.
We're reminding you to stay tuned and keep watching.